So today we're going to focus on talking about your research in a sort of a setting beyond normal research venues, right? So we're going to talk about how to showcase your research in your LinkedIn profile to take advantage of all the skills that you're using and the topic expertise that you're building as you are thinking about your career next steps. You could be a postdoc in the beginning of your program, beginning of your postdoc, or a PhD student in the beginning of your program. You can still do this, right? You can still identify sort of a brand around your research. And we'll talk about how to do this as part of the broader LinkedIn platform. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to sort of walk through the different sections of your LinkedIn profile so that you can get a sense of how your research intersects with all these elements, or at least how your professional branding, your academic branding intersects with all these different sections of your LinkedIn profile. I'm going to go at speed, as I said, because I want to give you sort of broad advice, knowing that each of you has a different discipline area and a different career goal that is out there. I won't be able to speak to that directly, but hopefully what I'll give you is a foundation and then some resources to help you sort of explore this further as you are positioning yourself moving forward. The most important thing, I think, for a PhD or a postdoc is that in terms of LinkedIn is to think about who your audience is going to be, right? So everyone can find your LinkedIn profile, which is fantastic, right? You want people from all walks of life and all industries to find it. But who is the audience that you most want to speak to? Because that's going to sort of dictate how you want to leverage some of your research experiences, or how you want to talk about them, in what way you want to talk about these research experiences. Now, on LinkedIn, you can find plenty of faculty, right? These are just Penn alumni who are in sort of professor roles. And when I did a search for the keyword professor, I got 16,000 hits out of the 185,000 Penn alumni on LinkedIn. Doesn't mean that they're all active professors, but it gives you a sense that faculty are active on LinkedIn, right? Now, because if you're interested in faculty roles, you don't necessarily know which schools are going to have jobs or who's going to sort of want to interview you. So you can't necessarily focus in on a specific school or specific area, but you can make sure that your research is seen as being valuable and interesting and impactful across your field, right? And so if the faculty sort of focus, or if you have a faculty focus, you can make sure that as you're describing your research, it still keeps that with it, even on the LinkedIn platform, because there are people out there who will find that engaging. Similarly, and again, these are Penn alumni, there are plenty of people in industry and business and nonprofits and government and a whole bunch of recruiters. These are just Penn alumni recruiters, but many, many more out there who might be interested in the skills that you have as you're thinking about careers in expanded fields, identifying professional paths out there for you. And then obviously you want to frame your research slightly differently for that audience to make sure that they can really engage with it and understand what you've done and see value in the skills that you've used in those settings, right? So you may have both of these populations of interest in your mind. You may be open to all paths, but over time you should begin to sort of in your head formulate, well, this is the industry or field I'm most excited by. And then subtly you can make sure that your LinkedIn profile highlights your experience in a way that's going to be most exciting to that profile, that category of people, without excluding anyone else who might find you interesting in terms of your professional identity. So if we think about your research, there are probably three main areas that we can sort of highlight, right? There's a topic expertise that you have, cancer biology or poetry in the 17th century or whatever it is, right? Those are sort of your domain expertise. There are the skills that you use to do your research, whether those are technical skills, computer programming skills, archival skills, ethnography, whatever that looks like. And then there are transferable skills, things that are always valuable, your ability to manage a project, to communicate effectively, to have difficult conversations with your advisor and so on, right? These are sort of the three elements that sort of encapsulate your whole research. If you have a faculty focus, chances are your research topic, what you've done in your field to push the boundaries, is going to be the most important aspect of that. They're going to know or assume that you have the research skills in order to do that. And in most cases, faculty are less interested in transferable skills, even though they really should be more interested in them. So that might be how you sort of focus on or give priority to different elements of your research. If you're interested in a role like consulting or working in policy or science writing or any other sort of role that's more professionally focused, this is how you might want to talk about your research, by drawing out from it the transferable skills, the how you did your research, not necessarily what the research is, or not necessarily those specific research tools that you use, because you may not be doing those things in a new role, but the transferable skills that made you successful in your research are, right? So this is how you might sort of weigh and alter the parameters of how you talk about your research on your LinkedIn profile. this comes back to this idea of a brand, and maybe you don't like the word brand, that's perfectly fine, but all a brand is obviously is a sort of a collection of what it is that you want people to think about you or say about you to a certain extent, right? And you can affect your brand by telling people what they should think. Look, I'm really great at doing this, or I have this really great content knowledge. You can impact your brand by identifying outcomes of your work, publications, presentations, funding, right? Those are all parts of the things that people will intersect with your brand. You can also make sure that people are saying good things about you, or you can encourage them to do so, right? And if they do say those things, that's going to add a lot of value to your brand, because when people say something good about you, it has more weight than when you say it yourself, right? Because these are people who are putting their own reputation on the line to say good things about you. When I go on LinkedIn and I look at profiles of PhDs and postdocs, I see a lot of this, right? So people who have yet to sort of invest time into making it more than it is right now, which is perfectly fine. It's just a tool. You don't have to spend all your time doing this. But none of these things by themselves are really going to jump out at a reader who's looking at on LinkedIn, right? They're not going to be key elements that people go, oh, a generic postdoc, that's very exciting, right? Here are some other versions that are slightly more nuanced, right? So there's this person is a director of creative development at the Penn Biotech Group. This person who focuses on the geochemistry of lithium deposits. This person wants to improve cancer immunotherapy, right? So these become more interesting because they're sort of more future focused, or they're entangled more with a professional identity. And then here's another version of it, right? So immunologists, I couldn't quite decide if that was really good or not good enough to a certain extent in terms of creating a brand, but it's a very strong brand. So long as you want to be an immunologist moving forward, it's a really great brand because it's very simple, very direct. But all these other elements then add nuances to it, elements of your research or things that you're interested in. So we're going to sort of walk through the whole LinkedIn profile to give you examples like this of how you can intersect your research into the profile itself. I do want to start off with the visual elements. LinkedIn is a very visual platform, and so you want to make sure that you're making a good impression on that and not to have no photo or an upside down photo. Profiles with photos get more views than profiles without. If you're investing time in LinkedIn, then you want views to a certain extent. You want people to see that. Let me run through sort of some things to avoid as you're thinking about your photos, and then I'll jump back to the chat and answer this question that's popped up here. But as we think about these photos, the first line, they're perfectly good photos. The first row, it's just that they lack the visual connection, right? We're a highly social, highly visual species. We like facial features, we like eye contact and those types of things. So if you can recreate that in your photo, I think that provides a more welcoming approach to people looking at your profile. The second row is all about lighting, right? Lighting is the sort of the handshake of the virtual environment. It's the first impression that you're making to a certain extent. So getting the lighting right is great. It puts you in a better context. People can see you and appreciate you more. So it's worth investing in that. The third row here is an issue with too many body parts. If you have to cut people out of your photo to make that your profile picture, it's not the right profile picture for LinkedIn, right? You don't want additional body parts. Nor do you want to be missing parts of your body on the photo, right? So the bottom line is sort of the photo isn't the right shape for the platform itself. There's another element for being a PhD or a postdoc that's important as you think about your photo, right? I went over to Yale's LinkedIn site and I pulled some photos from Yale PhDs, so I didn't intersect with anyone from a Penn background, hopefully. There's absolutely nothing wrong with any of these photos, but the challenge is that they are oftentimes points in time, right? So the lab coat with a solution, right? It's where you are right now if you're a biomedical researcher. But if you're going to be a consultant, or want to be a consultant, or want to work in policy, or want to do something beyond that, that may not be the vision of you that you want people to see necessarily, not to not see it, but you want to be more than that. You want to be the professional person who can go beyond the bench into the workforce, right? So, being limited to where you are right now can be a challenge if you're trying to get people to visualize you doing the role that you want to do next, right? So the old adage of dress for the job that you want, not the job that you have, is sort of true when it comes to your profile picture too. Posters are very much like that as well, right? Posters are just like, being in a group of people and you've cut those other people out. They're not specifically your brand identity. It's just you with a poster. Poster is great, but it very much situates you in this context of doing active research in this one topic area that you might have, which is fantastic if R&D research is what you want, but can be limiting if you want to extend beyond that. So the photos that I often recommend on LinkedIn are going to be more like this, right? So they are, to a certain extent, more generalized, but they're very focused on just your identity and your visual perspective, your visual identity and your brand. They're all positive, they're all smiling, they're all good eye contact. There's nice backgrounds to these, they're not distracting, there's nothing else to catch the eye that's going to draw me away from that. You don't need to have a professional photographer to do this, you just need someone with a phone with a blur background feature, and about 30 minutes of you looking and feeling silly, or mostly feeling silly, smiling at this camera. And then one of those 100 photos that someone takes of you will be exactly what you need to make this a reality for yourself. My only exception is if you have animals. I have a PhD in animal behavior. I study chickens. I think anyone who can have a profile picture where you're looking professional with a chicken gets bonus points because it's extremely hard. This was a Yale postdoc, I think, with a giant dog. I don't necessarily recommend it. I just like seeing animals. So, works for me, doesn't necessarily work for other people. The next aspect of your LinkedIn profile is your name, right? So because we read names differently than we say names, it's very important that eventually people know not only to see your name and understand that's you, but also to hear it and say your name and it be your name as well, right? To get your pronunciation of your name correct. I went on Google Scholar and I searched for chickens, because as I said, my background was chickens, and I picked the first random paper that came up. And these 4 authors here, there are many ways that I could get their names horribly wrong if I say them, right? If I'm reading them, my head makes total sense, like Lord of the Rings. I can read all the names, I just can't say them. But if I try and say these names, chances are I'm going to get them wrong, and I'm not going to say it correctly. And you want people to be able to say your name and associate your name with research that they've read or seen at a conference, right? And you want them to get it right so that people know who you are and you have a very strong brand identity. So the way to do that on LinkedIn, obviously, is to make sure that you add your pronunciation to your profile. You'll need to go onto the LinkedIn app. You can't actually do it on the desktop setting for some reason, but download the app, edit your profile on the app, and there's an opportunity for you to add your audio recording of you saying your name in the way that you want people to say your name, right? And that's an amazing thing to be able to share with people, gives them confidence, makes you feel good, increases the sort of the positivity of any interaction that you have with someone. Highly recommend that. Once you've done that and recorded it, there's going to be a speaker icon next to your name on your profile. That's how people can figure out who you are, how to call you. It's great for job interviews, right? So that when you walk into your first job interview, they know exactly how to call you, and they don't feel awkward and you feel good. And that's going to be a wonderful way to start a job interview moving forward. Pronouns also can be added to your LinkedIn profile. They have their own separate section. So if you edit your profile on the mobile app or the desktop, you can have the option to add your pronouns there after your name, and that can be part of your identity as well. And then finally, as a sort of the smaller thing, your URL is going to be important too. That's the link that you can share with people so that people can see, get to your LinkedIn profile. You can put it on your CV, you can put it on your resume, many ways that you can share that. You want to customize it, right? So I customized mine because, first of all, Joseph Barber had been taken as the sort of singular entity, but also because the PhD that I have has been valuable to me in every role that I've ever had. And so it's great to be part of my brand. If you don't customize, this is what your profile is going to be looking like right now, and you'll be able to go onto your profile and see that and confirm that. Your name and a whole bunch of random numbers and letters that don't represent your brand in any way, shape, or form. So easy to update on your profile. You can go through and change that, make sure that people can get to your LinkedIn profile in a way that looks nice and clean and professional. In terms of the actual content then of your research, this is where the text comes into play, right? So first thing that people are going to see about you is going to be your headline. This sort of identifies elements of you that you want them to really walk away with, your main conclusions, your main themes. It's worth thinking about this, and this is changeable. You can change your mind every other week if you like to, if you want to. But this is where you can start identifying elements of your research, whether it's just a topic area or whether it's how you do your research, to make those come to life. As I said, if you leave it like this, none of these things say anything about you, right? A second-year graduate student is no better than a first year or no worse than a third year. And being linguistics at University of Pennsylvania says nothing about the nature of your work or how you do your work or the impact of your work. And so these are things that you want to sort of move away from. Now, here are examples that don't necessarily center the research topic around, in terms of what they cover, but they give you a sense of where people are and what is important within the research and beyond the research, right? So this is a combination of, I think I took this from master's and PhD students just to give you a nice selection. These are real headlines from Penn students and Penn postdocs. Some of these are going to be great, especially if you are a generalist, right? The question in the chat saying, what if I'm a generalist? You can sort of touch on broad general areas here as a sort of a way to introduce the reader to the broad range of topic areas or interest areas that you have, And then there are other avenues where you can go into more detail. So it's worth thinking about what you want your sort of takeaways to be. Sometimes you don't want to start writing these first. You want to write the next sections, the about section, the summary section first, and then decide what from that really jumps out as being the main takeaways. It's also a good idea to know what your takeaways are first and then write the summary. So it's worth having a discussion with us at Career Services or with your peers about what those main takeaways might be. That summary section then is the most narrative section of the LinkedIn profile, right? You have unlimited space to go into a lot of detail if you want to. It should make you make sense, right? Having read your summary, that about section, I should be able to look through the rest of your LinkedIn profile and see how things fit together and see why you're doing the things that you're doing. And also see where it is that you want to go next, right? The about section doesn't want to end with where you are right now. It wants to talk about the future. And that's true with your research as well, right? If you want to talk about your research in the about section and how exciting it is and what you've done, you should also speak about where it's going to take you next, because it's the next version of you that people are more excited by in many cases, because that could be their interaction with you. They're going to interact with you in the next role that you have, not necessarily in your current role. So thinking about your future research, just the same way that if you're writing a research statement for a faculty job, you have to think about the future research. You want to make sure that some of that comes to life in the about section too. Now, some best practices for writing that summary section, given that you all come from a wide range of disciplines and have a wide range of interests, I can't give you, this is what you need to write, but here are some general pointers first, and then we can go into some examples of what that looks like. Always first person, right? So you never want to have someone talking for you. Joseph Barber is an animal behaviorist, right? Because who is that narrator? You want to be doing the narrating. It's like you are introducing yourself in person to someone, and you want it to come across in that way. You also want to make it feel energizing. Many cover letters that I've read for people applying to faculty roles, where you talk about research, that oftentimes they're very formally written, and there's not a lot of sort of natural energy to that. But this is an opportunity to a broader audience to be more engaging, to talk about what you enjoy, to talk about why the research is exciting and impactful, to talking about why you're excited to do the next thing. So adding a bit of energy, finding your own voice to talk about your research, not your advisor's voice or not your search committee's voice, but finding your own voice is going to be very important. I started off talking about your audience, right? Knowing who your audience is going to dictate how you frame conversations about your research in that about section. So if it's more faculty oriented, you can keep it contained in that area. If you want to make sure that your research is applicable to a broad range of people, then you're going to have to find ways to make it engaging to them, making sure that you're not talking about your research in a way that people just won't get or won't find interesting. And then make sure that whatever you do cover in the about section resonates with something in the rest of the document, right? Your headline, your about section, and your experiences should all intersect. They should be cohesive and coherent in different ways. So here are some about sections that I took from actual Penn students and postdocs. So the first one, I'm a PhD candidate. My thesis work focuses on this. So thesis work is great, but it does have that student feel to it. So if you're trying to, again, at some point move beyond the idea of being a student, you may not want to talk about your research as your thesis, but about your, in terms of your research. Certainly, this is what you're doing right now, or this is what this student is doing right now. Is it what they want to do moving forward? Do they have other interests that they want to integrate into this? That could be an area of focus there, where you're not just saying, here's one project I'm working on, but you're sort of situating that project in a broader landscape of work. I'm currently researching the second one, right? So this is present time, which is good because you are existing in the present time only, but because you want to think about making connections and integrating future connections into your network, you want to make sure that there's enough going forward so that people can see that. I'm a fifth-year graduate student, so that's their primary identifier here is a fifth-year graduate student. Obviously, that changes every year, but that may not be the main takeaway that you want, right? So there's so many more things about being a PhD, about being creative and innovative, about being persistent, about being committed, right? So you could find different descriptors other than a fifth year there. I'm interested in pursuing research in developmental, right? I'm interested in pursuing, gives you that slight future focus, which I think is what this person is trying to get at here, but that takes the reader into the future where you might go next. Also allows them to think about how they can help you. Maybe they are a recruiter and they have opportunities, right? And so that they know that that is the case. The last one, I have strong interest in grant making in the higher education landscape, right? So again, creating a domain expertise or domain knowledge area. I'm a content expert in these areas and I want to stick in that area. That's good for your brand as well, right? If you want to take ownership of a particular focus or particular research area, then the about section is a way that you can begin to start making that case that you have that content expertise. Here are then some broader examples. So Jean here is a PhD candidate in biochemistry. I like the background picture. You know, it speaks nicely, resonates well with the brand there, right? So that's a nice way to sort of add to that, add value to that. As part of their about section, they talk about their skills. My skills involve these areas, right? So skills and technical skills are great if you want to continue into R&D, because recruiters will be looking for those skills and they need to know that you have those skills. But there's also positive language here, right? I enjoy writing. I'm eager to learn, right? This is that energizing language where you can start to talk about elements both of your research and of the work that you're doing beyond your research, so that people can see the value that you bring, right? So when you're talking about your research, these research skills, as I mentioned right at the beginning, are one thing that you can make sure come to life about you, but you can focus on other aspects too. Huang here did a wonderful job of featuring publications, right? Your publications are the sort of bread and butter in many cases of what you're doing, and you want to make sure that they do come to life and people can find those. And so featuring them and pinning them to your profile and making sure that they are there is a wonderful thing to do. You need to advocate for yourself. You need to promote your own research and say, look, I did this thing and this is impactful. And then more importantly, you need to do this for your peers, right? People in your lab, in your group who are publishing and getting out there, share that content too. Congratulate them on that, because you will be associated with that content as well, but it will also be a wonderful positive reinforcement for the people that you work with. Academia is not great on positive reinforcement, so the more that you can do that, the better. So here's an example, right? So this isn't about a paper, but it could be about a paper, right? Someone could have posted a paper on LinkedIn, and then you could comment on that, just like Nicole commented on Miriam's statement here. And so you can see that Nicole's photo and her name are at the top of this, then Miriam's content, and then Nicole commented at the bottom. So Nicole gets 2 mentions for highlighting and congratulating Miriam. So in terms of getting notice on LinkedIn, this is a wonderful way of doing that makes Miriam feel good and also gives you visibility for doing that. So every paper, every presentation, every publication that you could highlight for other people is a really wonderful way of integrating more positive reinforcement into the pen experience. Someone asked about how detailed the about section should be. You'll see it varies, right? A short paragraph and a very long one. You want to make sure that you understand, first of all, what it is that you want someone to know about you, right? Because the length is really dictated by the content that you want to share, not by any arbitrary parameters. But 2 paragraphs, I would say, is a nice one. One could be about your research, and one could be about other things, or one could be about the present, and one could be about the future, right? So something that's a little bit dynamic, that has that sort of 2 to 3 paragraph version, I think is the right length to have. A single paragraph is hard to capture everything that's important about you. Tanya here, writing her about section, says that she's interested in being a photographer and an artist and exploring opportunities to pursue science communication. So her background photo is a key aspect of her narrative here, of her brand, right? Maybe it's her photo, maybe it's just a photo that illustrates the types of things that she's interested in, but it works well together. So talking about the research and then sort of illustrating it, as it were, is a great approach to take. Abigail here does a good job of highlighting some of the outcomes, some of the research outcomes, right? 3 peer-reviewed papers and publications and presentations, right? So it's right as part of the summary, or that about section, because that is meaningful and it is impactful, and it does demonstrate the ability to highlight your research accomplishments. Even if people aren't in your field or don't know exactly what you've been studying, they can value the fact that you have been productive and you've reached these points, right? So this is a great way of broadening out your research to an audience by demonstrating impacts of that. Now, on your LinkedIn profile, there is a publication section, and you can list all those publications there, and then you can link to the publications themselves. So here are the publications on lipid droplets. I clicked on show publication, and there I am right onto the publication itself. So how to talk about your research in LinkedIn? Verbalize it, integrate it into your narrative, make sure you're listing the outcomes, videos of you presenting, papers and abstracts that are out there, right? So people can find those things. Now, Jacob is a wonderful example of how to do this well, right? So from his headline through his about, through his experience section. So in the headline, he identifies his topic area, PhD candidate, English cinema, media studies. He broadens it out to be a university and public educator, and then sort of adds value onto that by talking about being an academic and curatorial researcher, right? So many different elements all feel academic and all feel that they integrate into what he's going to say in the next section. But again, a good sort of demonstration of what this looks like. In his about section, he sort of has two paragraphs here, one that focuses on his broader skill set and identity, and one that focuses on, more specifically, his research area. I'm a humanities researcher, making connections between these things. I excel at research, academic and curatorial research. I have a passion for programming, and I want to do this thing. I want to build connections between government and university and the public, right? These are current and future things that he wants to do, and they're broader elements. And then he talks about his research itself, 18th century literature and the history of science, right? And the dissertation is there. One doesn't overwhelm the other. They both work nicely together as part of his narrative moving forward. And then if we drop down to his experience section, this is where he makes the dissertation come to life, not in terms of the very specific nuances of what he's been studying, but how he's done the research and the impact of that research and the outcomes of that research. Talking about the skills he used, analyzing the data, communicating it to different populations, right? So a wonderful example of how this experience section then becomes a great way to illustrate the research in action without being too specific, so that it excludes a majority of an audience or too general. But it certainly highlights a lot of those transferable and research skills that are there. Because you all have different backgrounds, I'm not going to go into detail. Obviously, we have a short time on the experience section, but the best way to write an experience section, obviously, is to not do this, right? Because this says nothing about your background. There's 3 years here of sort of emptiness. You want to make sure it has something. The best way to do it is to really think about writing a resume, right? And if you have a resume, you can sort of integrate some of your resume into the LinkedIn profile. If you haven't got a resume yet, then use these videos from the PhD career training platform. This will give you the idea about how to make your skills come to life. And making your skills come to life in the experience section is basically what you're doing. So it's going to look similar to a resume. It's not going to be a resume, but going through these sessions is going to be a great way of giving you a solid foundation for doing that. Now, on the PhD career training platform, they also have how to build your LinkedIn profile, right? So they have a video doing exactly what I'm talking about now, but going over it in more detail and more slowly as well, because I appreciate I'm going through at speed. LinkedIn also has resources on how to make a good LinkedIn profile. So you have access to LinkedIn Learning, which is a tool that you don't get access to once you graduate. It's a part of the premium package of LinkedIn, but you get it for free. Any topic that you have a question about, you can find a session on or a set of programs on LinkedIn Learning. Go to your LinkedIn profile, look in the top right-hand corner, you'll see the icon there for LinkedIn Learning. And so you can use this as well to make sure that you are updating your profile and taking advantage of that. And then when you're ready, obviously you want LinkedIn to be used as part of your networking approach. And so there's another video on how to make the most of LinkedIn for broadening your network, exploring careers. We're not going to cover that today, but there's plenty of information out there on the Penn Career Services website and on our YouTube channel for you to find those things. But I wanted to give you the foundation for how you can, create a solid identity and brand so that when you are doing outreach, people can really appreciate the value that you bring and the skills that you have and the knowledge that you have. Get that sorted out first. And then as you're doing networking, people are going to resonate with your identity much more positively and beneficially for you as well. If I had to give you some next steps, what I would suggest is that you should do all these things, but promote your work, promote your research, and then really celebrate the successes of those people around you, your peers and people in your lab, in your group, in your department, in your field. It's a great way for you to celebrate them, but you will be noticed by doing that as well, right? That's the benefit of doing that. Develop a multimedia approach. Your papers, your data, your things that you can share in different fields, different mediums, you can do that on LinkedIn, and that's a great way of doing that. Fundamentally, though, identify your audience. Who do you really want to see your information, and who do you really want to resonate with? Knowing that the broader impact that you have, that's great, but you definitely want to make sure that you are showcasing all of the great skills that you have to the broadest audience, but specifically to that audience that you most care about as well.